Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. This is the Science Dispatch Podcast. My name is Cameron English, host as always, joined by Dr. Chuck Dinnerstein, Director of Medicine at the American Council on Science and Health. Chuck, nice to be with you again. What's going on?
Not a thing. Unfortunately, it is still cold. And so I'm considering my vacation options, as we discussed previously, for looking for a warm climb.
Right. So you're headed to the homeland, or at least in proximity?
Yes, well, I could go where all the ancestral Jews go, to Miami.
Sip some Mai Tais, eat a steak just like they did in Sinai way back when.
Yes, or, yes, it's our people, we wandered. We wandered into Miami.
All right, well, best of luck with that. Make sure you take some sunscreen. Before you go, we've got a story to discuss. This is by our resident toxicologist, Susan Goldhaber. This is from late January. It's called Red Dye Number 3, Bad Law Defeats Fact. So here's her summary, Chuck, and then you take it away. So she writes, on January 16, the FDA banned the use of red dye number 3 in food and ingested drugs, stating that it causes cancer in male rats, but not in humans. This is being hailed as a victory for the healthy foods movement. Red dye number 3 is being banned because of an outdated law, the Delaney Clause, which needs to be amended or repealed. Okay, so what's this Delaney Clause? Who's this Delaney fella? Tell us about
the Delaney and the Poison Squad of many years ago. And basically the Delaney Clause is, I guess, an amendment to the law setting up the Food and Drug Administration, which came out after World War II, and basically they were trying to find a way to protect humans from risk, and so they determined that no additive could be placed in foods if it caused cancer in man or animals. So that's a large group to deal with, and it comes about, at least historically from a science perspective, because of the work done around Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the causes of genetic mutation. And most of the models at that time were looking at radiation and single base pair mutations. And based upon that science, which was valid at the time, they developed the Delaney Clause, saying that if it could cause a mutation in an animal, then it certainly is possible to cause a mutation in a human. But that science itself is out of date. What we've discovered over time is that a single base mutation in our DNA does not necessarily result in a mutation, because the body, having had millennia to work on the project before we got to it, has any number of DNA repair mechanisms available. And so that most of the times we either repair the DNA or we isolate it and get rid of the cell. So here's an interesting fun fact about it that we know. As the size of the animal increases, the chance of developing cancer lessens. The chance of an elephant or a whale developing cancer is many-fold smaller than that of a human being. And so in one sense, that doesn't seem to make sense, because they have a lot more cells that can go rogue than we do. But as it turns out, these DNA repair mechanisms are triply and quadruply multiplied in the elephant and in the whale, so that they have a far more robust repair system than humans, and that's why we tend to have more problems than they do. So that's the science part of it. But then I got to thinking about it, because, and I'm sure I'm going to get trouble for this one, says, I don't really care about the red dye number 3 being removed. I can live with that. That's okay with me. I know that doesn't go along with being a good scientist, but it doesn't add much to my days. But it did make me go back and look at the issue, and you have to wonder why people put red dye in food to begin with. And the answer to that goes back a long time, with the observation that we eat with our eyes. And that's what really brings us to the table to use our food. So, in an evolutionary sense, you can think that we used our eyes to locate food on the horizon. So that makes some sense why there'd be some relationship between what we see visually and how we respond. And you could also think of, you get that image of Pavlov and the dogs salivating over the meal, and that's certainly the case. But you can see that in the things that we do today. We have a whole genre of photography, which is food photography, let alone the thousands and thousands of pictures we take of what we're having for dinner to share on social media. My wife and I are foodies. I will confess to that, and I will go back and look in our Google photographs, and there are hundreds of pictures of food that I can no longer name that we were having for dinner. So there's a lot to be said for that relationship between the eyes and food. I went back and took a look around, and of course, some colors scientists have found are more conducive to making us hungry than others. And this should surprise no one that the color that tops the list in terms of being enticing is red. Okay, surprise, right? And as it turns out, from studies that they've done, is when we see red, it increases our heart rate and begins to prepare our gastric physiology for some yum yum. So there's a lot of reasons why the marketers would have chosen among the many colors red to work with.
Let me ask you, maybe you're going to get to this, but is there some sort of an evolutionary explanation? So like if you kill some wild game and you see red, you go, oh, that's where the nutrients are, something like that? Or am
You're
I
such a carnivore. What about the little red berries?
Same concept though, right? Like,
well, yeah.
It's a cue for nature to go, that's where you need to get the stuff that's going to help you survive.
And so another color that will set people off is green, and which gives it that it's associated with freshness and abundance. Yellow, orange, a lot of the color, all the rainbow colors of the vegetables on our plate are colors that our eyes respond to and set our gastric juices a-flowing. There are three colors that we associate with not being so interested in eating, and they include black, no surprise that rotted food, which is often black in color, is not appetizing, purple and blue. And then, of course, we would not be socially responsible if we didn't say that there was at least one switch hitter amongst the colors, and that's brown, which can go either way. Because brown is often associated with comfort foods. That nice brownish layer on the apple pie. It's, of course, also associated with people that have taken that apple pie another 15 minutes in the oven and gotten too burnt. So brown can, I guess, go either way depending on the saturation of the color. So that explains why red dyes have been used. I did find it particularly amusing in reading the articles on the mass media that they all began by pointing out that red dye number 3 comes from oil, and it's one of the great evils of our time. But that, of course, ignores most of what we know about the history of organic chemistry, because organic chemistry was born out of the discovery of oil and the discovery of all the various dyes that could be developed from that, which became a great boon to the European clothing industry. And that's it. That's pretty far afield for starting with the topic.
There's insight in that, because those are the kind of questions nobody really asks. And to be honest, I think I'm like you in that I didn't really look into this because I just don't care. Like I'm more concerned if my daughter's going to find a red Skittle on the floor and swallow it by accident than I am the fact that it's red. Like, who gives an S? You know what I mean? So I guess that's my question to you, right? Like this was proposed in 2023 by the Center for Science in the Public Interest, which is neither about science nor the public interest, and as far as I can tell. And so I can imagine that they do what they always do, which is they found some rodent studies or some epidemiology, and they said, when you give rats 8 billion tons of this, they develop thyroid cancer or whatever, and therefore we need to ban it. So in other words, it sounds to me like there wasn't really any meaningful discussion about why the dyes are used or should they be used. It was just
No, this didn't come down to science in the end at all. And this was the second time for them to go around. They'd tried this previously and been turned down. So they went really on a procedural basis, and they stuck to the letter of the law. And the Delaney Clause is very clear. Induced cancer in mammals, in man or animals. And there was clear evidence that at some dose it worked on rats. And so on a strictly procedural basis, that meant the FDA had to say, okay, it's out. Now, to be fair to the other side of the issue, there are a lot of compounds that are called generally recognized as safe that were grandfathered in back in the 20s and 30s that there may be some problems with. We just haven't come to find them yet. But I agree with you. This was just another one of those times when one group came by, found a problem, tried one way to get at it legally, didn't work, found a procedural way to go after it, which did work, and is going to cause the manufacturers to change their formulation. So the reality is that 5 years before, when they tried the first time, the handwriting was on the wall for the manufacturers, and they were already, finding alternatives to use.
Perhaps I'm too cynical, but I could imagine the FDA and their lawyers going, okay, is this really worth us going to court over? Are we going to stand our ground? Are we going to plant our flag on red dye? No. And then they fall back on this legal justification. And I say that because the FDA, all the federal agencies do this. They will flout the law as written when they deem it necessary, and they won't call it that. They'll say, based on our expert understanding, the law needs to be understood in this way, blah, blah, blah. Here's 80 pages of precedent.
Right, but now with the Chevron deference gone, that's off the table. And the other thing that's interestingly off the table is the fact that this was done through a citizen's petition. And we're going to see a lot more of that. The decision in September in California to tell the EPA that it has to redo fluoride comes from a citizen petition that required the courts to review the science and make its own determination about what should be done. And again, they just followed the letter of the law and said, yes, there's evidence that fluoride causes problems, causes a decrease in IQ. Now, whether that was good evidence or bad evidence, the court didn't get into, but there is evidence, and therefore the EPA has to go back and redo this. And that'll take another 3 years to redo fluoride.
The wheels of government grind on. Yeah, that's definitely
round and round.
It's probably a question for a lawyer. But from other issues that I follow, I know that the FDA, even when they're flatly wrong, they'll go to court and they'll invent some legal reasoning and they'll drag it out for as long as they can. So I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. It just sounds to me that they're like, okay, fine. Oh, the law is the law. We got to follow the law.
Yes, it's interesting depending on what day of the week it is and whose special interests are being gored. How the government and big business interpret these issues. I mean, what you can only say is that the advocacy groups that are based on suing companies and getting donations based on these lawsuits will continue to prosper. If nothing else about the next several years, this will be the age of attorneys.
It's a fascinating subject of study in its own right, as the justifications they come up with. They'll petition the FDA multiple times. The agency will say no. Then they'll sue them, and round the circle goes. So yeah, it's fun. So I guess a couple of takeaways then, Chuck. This chemical, even though it's ostensibly being taken out or has been taken out of products, it wasn't going to kill anybody. Everyone seems to know that. Even FDA said that. But we're going through the motions in essence.
We're going to get rid of it. It's going to be one less problem to deal with. Your Fruit Loops will look slightly different, but if you're eating Fruit Loops, there's probably some other areas we could discuss besides how they're colored.
Well said. Okay, so a red starburst, if you eat too many, still not good for you, regardless of how it's colored, right?
Right. Well, the only thing I can say as a physician, and this is a well-known medical fact, is the red and green Jell-O are the most curative when you're in the hospital.
Well put. There's your
Medical
life-saving.
fact for the day.
There you go. That's right. You want to be a surgeon. That's all you need to know. Apparently, is that.
Well, no, we don't let people eat before our surgery, and it's a very different situation. You can't have any Jell-O. Maybe afterwards.
All right. So once again, this story is called Red Dye Number 3: Bad Law Defeats Facts by Susan Goldhaber. Lots of good insight in here if you just want a little bit of a deep dive into the toxicology of this chemistry. And there you go. Go check out the story. It's on our website, acsh.org. Click the subscribe tab, punch in your email. We will send you the articles that we publish. And the ones that you read are the ones that we talk about. Thank you, as always, for 15 minutes of your attention. We really appreciate it. We'll see you next time.